Hey guys, it's your boy, Baldface8020, back again with another great commentary. Tonight may be more of an average commentary, not a great one like usual, because really I'm making this video more just because I feel like making a video, as opposed to that it's a subject that really just needs to be talked about. So we'll do the political stuff at first, and then I'll do some life update stuff at the end. So something in this video for everybody. If you read both sides in politics, you know, the left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans, I mean, you'll learn pretty fast that the two sides of the country live in a completely different reality. They live in completely different realities from each other. They just, like the same event, you know, and Exhibit A can be Trump's speech at the UN today, can be just taken diametrically opposites. Like you look on the right and they see it as this huge victory, you know, for Trump, a great performance for Trump, and the left sees it as another humiliation for Trump. And you know, being on the right and having been on the right, you know, my whole life really, and being in this struggle, there's been many times where I felt like we were losing. Even in Trump's first term, you know, I felt like we were still on the defensive. Like, I mean, things were better in Trump's term than they had been during, like, where things were really dark was in the Obama eras, particularly the Obama after beating Romney. Like, that was probably the low point in my life, like where it wasn't just me. We all thought like the right has been defeated. You know, the left has achieved, you know, their dystopia. And which doesn't mean I never lost faith in final victory. I always knew that liberalism would be defeated, but I did lose. I thought that there was no way to democratically win. I was like, the only solution is going to be dissolution and civil war. And again, I know I'm not the only one who felt that way. You know, then I started to get more optimistic way after, you know, the Democrats just got clobbered in the 2014 midterms. And then, you know, we get Trump and the rest is history. But I always felt like even when things were going well, that the right was on the defensive, you know, especially because, you know, right and left means something different now than it did post-Obama, because the coalitions kind of got sorted out. Remember, pre-Obama, there were a lot of white working class in the Democratic Party, and they were a really important part of it. And then it was Obama's victory over Hillary was kind of the end of that, you know, as them being the important bloc. So I guess, but anyway, so the reason I'm bringing all this up, right, is ever since, really ever since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you know, I've felt the other way around, like we're winning, like just the sense that we're on the ascendant. I didn't necessarily, like I've said before, I didn't necessarily know that Trump was going to get back in. And even if Trump did get back in, my feeling was Trump's second term would be just like his first and not really make a difference. That, you know, there was no real way to stop mass immigration and the country was going to fall apart anyway. So I was just like, as I've said before, I felt like I don't need Trump anymore because Putin and Xi are going to take care of it, you know, take care of liberalism for me. And like, so the thing is, so I voted for Trump, but I wasn't enthusiastic, and I wasn't really like when he got in, I was just kind of like I said, I didn't expect anything. I expected his second term to be just like that. It wasn't until like way later on that I realized, oh wow, this is more like I expected his first term to be. But especially with, and I know I harp on this a lot, but you know, you see stuff like the Sydney Sweeney ad, which, again, I don't think the ad in and of itself is very significant. I think I think that it's symbolic value. It's not that we're winning because of the Sydney Sweeney ad. It's the Sydney Sweeney ad is because we're winning. Because maybe you've heard this expression, maybe I've ever said it. Politics is downstream from culture. And my whole life, okay, even before Obama, the culture was left. The culture was with the left. The right and the Republicans were seen as like these oppressive, moralistic scolds, really like the joyless, fun-killing type. They're the ones who want to censor everything and ban video games and preach abstinence and shit like that. And the Democrats are more and very pro-war, not that any essentially, but also very pro like FBI and stuff like that. And the Democrats are more the like, you do your own thing. Like we're down with everybody. We're not, just let people do what they want. And like I just assumed that the culture would always be with the left because that's all I'd ever known my entire life. Like even when the Republicans won, the left was winning the cultural battle. And then and then things started to change. And I mean, I guess it changed, it's never just one thing or one event. It's just, I think it's a lot of stuff goes into it. But obviously one big thing was Trump moving the Overton window. But I think what happened is you had frustration building up for a long time, but there was just during Trump's first term, which culminated in COVID and the George Floyd riots, just people getting increasingly sick of the left and the left's like cultural revolution that they had started during the Obama years. And then this really but it didn't really like ossify or it was there during Trump's first term. It wasn't enough to get him to win that, to beat Biden, whether it was legitimate or not, but it was there. And then it really solidified during Biden's term. And, so Trump gets back in and we're just in a completely different cultural moment. And I think, I mentioned the Sydney Sweeney ad, but another thing is you can look at the reception that Trump got when he went to the UK, and, was having dinner with the royal family. That would have been unthinkable, in Trump's first term, I mean, and it's not like that. I mean, the numbers are pretty much the same. The people still there's still plenty of people out there who really hate Trump, but it's just a different vibe. There's a different, feeling in the air. So I'm saying all this to see, like, to me, I feel like we're winning. Like, I feel things can change, but right now it's obvious to me that we're winning, that the left is in retreat. And, I'm assuming that subconsciously the left knows that, but you go and you read their stuff and they don't think that way. They really think that, one thing that they're always saying is like Trump's approval is collapsing, but they've been saying this for like 5 months. they've been talking about it like for 5 months. It's like, so it was collapsing 5 months ago and it's collapsing even more now, because if you look at Trump's approval, it's remarkably steady. He had like a very brief honeymoon, which was still pretty low. And then he's just kind of where he is now, which is he's about as popular as Obama was in the later part of his term. Not at the very tail end of his term, because then Obama, because people were, as Obama was leaving and people started comparing Obama to Trump and Hillary. And, the economy really did seem like it was getting a little bit better because it had been really bad during the Obama years. And people Obama's approval got higher. But if you look at like Obama's approval, which got pretty low before the 2014 midterms, like a year later, before the primaries kicked off, the Democratic and Republican primaries kicked off for the 2016 election, Obama's approval was pretty good. I mean, it was below 50 mostly, but it was good. And Trump's is maybe a little bit lower than that, but I think the polls underestimate Trump by a few points. So when you put that fudge factor in, he's about as popular as Obama was then, which in our very polarized society is good. I mean, it's maybe not good, but it's okay. And I remember their first term. They were always talking about, they said the same thing in the first term. They would be like, oh, his approval's collapsing. And it was never collapsing. The only time Trump's approval really got bad in his first term was when he did that, stupid government shutdown. And but Trump's approval was remarkably steady. And then, so then another cope they had was that faggot Mueller. And they said, oh yeah, Mueller's going to bring Trump down. And, this term it's different. They don't really have, but it's different in some ways that they're like, oh, he's going to, they don't really have like they really thought Mueller was going to bail them out. And before even Mueller, they were like, well, this Stormy Daniels thing, this thing. This time they seem to get that there's not going to be a magic bullet. But you do see them keep saying his failing presidency, his falling approval. Again, his approval's not falling. It's fine. His approval is totally fine. And his failing presidency, I mean, where are the failures? That's what I'm just trying to see. And this is like, they just live in a completely different reality. And, on the right, we have it too. Because I remember, reading people on the right talking about Obama's presidency being a disaster and a failure and stuff. And it's like, where are you seeing that? Like, I mean, I think Obama was a horrible president because he appointed left-wing judges and he let in tons of immigrants. But other than that, most people don't care about that shit. Most normies are just living their lives, and life during the Obama era was fine. It was rough, because he inherited that recession, but things kept getting better, the whole time. So like, I don't understand. Like, it depends what you mean by failure. Like, yes, it was if you. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. To me, a failure would be like incompetent. The country is just in like disarray and stuff. But Obama was bad. He did bad things, but he did them competently. So I don't understand how he succeeded in doing bad things. Obama would have been a better president had he been a failure. The problem wasn't that Obama was a failure, it's that he was a success. And, the Democrats have this hate boner for Trump that they keep having to say he's so incompetent and stuff. It's like, he's so incompetent, why are you so anxious to get rid of him? You want somebody else. Because the thing is, who but Trump could have done all this stuff? So like, on one hand, they want to say he's a Nazi for getting rid of all these immigrants. On the other hand, they want to say, oh, he's actually not getting rid of immigrants at all. There were just as many deportations under Biden, which is just like, they're such bullshit. I remember even talking to my brother that back in, who's smart, who's really smart, and talking to my brother back, at the end of Obama's first term. And I was saying that it's tough for me to rate Obama, the thing is, because the country, for the everyday American, the country under his watch has done well. But I don't care about that. All I care about, the only job, the president has two real jobs. One is to appoint right-wingers to the courts, which Obama did the opposite of. He appointed left-wingers to the courts. The other is to keep out immigrants, and he's brought in tons of immigrants. And again, my brother, who's well-read and smart, said, hasn't Obama deported the most immigrants of anybody ever? Which is bullshit, but that's liberals just live in this complete fantasy world, because technically, yeah, because they changed the classification. Obama made it seem like, oh, I'm actually deporting a lot of people, which he isn't. What he did was he caught the people he caught at the border that he returned, he counted those as deportations. But from the interior, he didn't deport anybody unless they were a criminal. So now, we're using honest stats, And you're seeing like, and you're enforcing stuff, and you're seeing net out migration. There's more people leaving America than coming in. And then, now we got this thing with, the H-1Bs or HB1. I can't remember if it's H-1B or HB1s. But slowly but surely, we're really shutting down immigration. And, look, we're not going to deport the tens of millions of people who are here illegally and legally. That would be, the political consensus for it isn't there. But we don't necessarily need to. Their thing is that would be, we can deport some of them. We don't have to even if we could deport another, figure there's probably about 50 million illegals, and then I don't know, 40 million legals. If we could just deport another 30 million, net 30 million, but even if we can't deport any, it's okay as long as we don't let in any more. Don't let any more come in. Because like I said, eventually they'll just assimilate in to the American thing. This is one of the big successes of Trumpism was to make the Trump coalition less racialized. And what I feel like that we are so close that if right now, it's going to depend on the economy, but right now, I feel like if Vance can win the 28 election, that will be it for liberalism. In the entire, liberalism as we know it will no longer exist. Now, it doesn't mean you're always going to have left-wing parties. As long as you have educated people in urban areas, you're going to have left-wing parties, just like. And, and in America, it's even worse because you don't just need the left-wing people, the educated people in urban areas who shouldn't be allowed to vote at all, in my opinion. And, but you can use minority bank votes. There's in America, there's tens of millions of non-whites who economically would be more allied, it would be in a natural system, would be allied with the right, who, vote for the Democrats for racial reasons as opposed to cultural or economic reasons. And, but which is all part of the thing about how democracy doesn't really work and shit like that. But it's always going to be there. The Democrats are always going to be there. They're always going to be a problem. I'm not counting on the elimination of the left in the Western world. But I do think that, again, the sort of globalist liberalism, that's always going to be what they're inclined for. But I think that I'll try to draw a picture for you. If Vance wins in 28, I think that even when a Democrat eventually wins again, which they will, it'll be a Democrat who's, I'm not saying that the Democrats are going to become Stephen Miller or anti-immigrant, but they're basically going to concede that point. They're basically going to be yeah, okay, we're left wing and we still are really gay, but we hear you. We hear the people on that we need to put the American worker first. So it'll be it'll be a softer face to the anti-immigrant thing, but in practice they'll still be anti-immigrant, kind of like what it is in Denmark. In Denmark, they realized that the right-wing anti-immigrant parties were going to take over, so the left just said, okay, you know what? We'll work with the moderate party. We'll work with the other, centrist globalist parties. We'll still be centrist globalist pieces of shit, but we will give in on the immigration stuff. We'll give in on the anti-immigration stuff. Now, before, I used to think this is something that the left will just never give up. This is something that not just the left, but all the establishment parties in Europe, they would rather just have a civil war than give up on the immigration stuff. And I don't even think I was wrong to think that. I think there was a time where they would have. But I think, look what I said, politics is downstream of culture. I think it's getting to more and more. You're seeing them be ready to be like, okay, look, we'll give up on the immigration. All right, no more, no, we're gonna be the same. Like I said, we're still shit, but no more immigrants. I think that's where it's gonna go. I think not necessarily if the if Vance doesn't win in 28 or whoever the Republican nominee is, but if he does, yes, I think that's it. So even I think it's over for immigration. It's over for multiculturalism, not just in America, but in all the Western countries. Like I said, Democrats don't seem to feel that way, but there are exceptions, right? And but one thing is like on the right, like I said, the Democrats, most liberals seem to think things are still going pretty good. They think they're going to clean up in the midterms. They think they're going to win in 28. Those things might be true. I don't know. But like Republicans are acting more like the Democrats during Obama's years. Like when I'm talking about when I read their stuff, they think the Dems are just finished as a party. And they're even talking about like, well, what can the Democrats do to be competitive, with us? Or like, are we just going to dominate forever? Just like the Democrats during the Obama years thought about their own party. Because I remember them saying, well, they'd be like, oh, well, what the Republicans need to do is become pro-gay and drop the pro-life stuff and be pro-immigration. And I was like, and it's like, okay, first of all, it's not going to happen, especially the pro-immigration thing. Secondly, what would be the point of even having a Republican Party? So basically what they're saying is, they were saying is, well, if the Republicans are going to be competitive, they need to become the Democrats, and then it just, like it wasn't going to happen and it made no sense. But now you've got people on the right saying the same thing, saying like, well, if the Democrats are going to be competitive, they need to, in the future, they need to become anti-immigrant and anti-woke and like embrace tariffs and be really tough on crime and shit like that. And, I don't think it's true. I think that, most elections come down to fundamentals, like in a system like America where it's two parties, and fundamentals and tribal identity. And the fact is, demographically, the Democrats are still in pretty good shape. The country's getting increasingly non-white. So, and a lot of Republican voters are aging into death, more so than for Democrat voters. So, the Democrats have a lot of things going for them on a fundamental level. I would stop short though of saying this means that the Democrats don't really have problems, which it seems to be where most of them are, because they'll say stuff like, the Dems will say stuff like what I just said, like that, demographically they're in good shape, and that the election with Trump beat Kamala, but it wasn't like a huge victory. He didn't even win he won more votes than Kamala, but he didn't win over 50% of the vote. And the fundamentals for Kamala were terrible, and she was an unusually bad candidate. Kamala, I'm sorry. She was an unusually bad candidate. And so Trump won, but it didn't show that the Democrats need to make some massive changes, because in a better environment, and especially with a better candidate, the Democrats, almost certainly would have won. So you don't necessarily. So why do you need to change your message or anything? And the reason is because that's only a very surface level look at it. And, when you look at, generally I ignore issue polls, because, like if you ask an issue, basically the public's going to spit back a left-wing answer. Like you can just say are tariffs, should we have tariffs? The public's going to say no, because that's just, the public always goes with left. Should America let in 8 billion immigrants a year? Yeah, absolutely. You're going to get something ridiculous like 90% are like, yeah, we need to bring in more pieces of shit from the rest of the world into America. We don't have enough pieces of shit at home. Let's bring in more. And, part of this is just because people are retards who should not be allowed to, rule themselves. But part of it's because I don't even know what it is, just the way polling works. And, and this is one thing that, liberals like always lie to themselves about, because they would always say like, oh, well, when we prosecute Trump, it'll change things because the polling all said, like, would you vote for Trump if he's prosecuted? Like, if he gets prosecuted for whatever it is, will you vote for Trump? And then the polls all come back saying, oh, no, we would never vote for Trump if he's been prosecuted. It was like a ridiculous amount. And then they proceeded to go and the public proceeded to vote for him. So you don't worry about that shit. Like, there's certain polls that you just need to just ignore. They don't mean anything. But there's more general polls that can actually tell you something. And that's it when you look at, like, do you approve of Trump on immigration? No. Do you approve of Trump on the economy? No. Do you approve of Trump on healthcare? No, of course. Because it's anything with do you approve of Trump on, the answer is always going to be no, because that's just how the public reacts to stuff. But when you take Trump out of the equation and you don't ask about the specific policy, because again, you ask people, Americans, what should America's immigration policy? Their policy is basically, we should just let in infinite people. And then we should just never deport anyone. That's really what they say, because they're such fucking faggots. But whatever, we're not here to talk about the faggotry of the American people. But we go to revealed preference, because they say all that, but they don't mean it, because if they did, their voting patterns would show it. But if you take Trump out of the equation and you take specific policies out of the equation and you say, who do you trust more on crime, immigration, the economy? Those are the issues where the Republicans just clobber the Democrats. That is a real problem. It doesn't mean that Democrats need to change those to win at a national level. They can still win the presidency without it. But as long as that sort of like cult, like just sort of mass distaste and distrust for the Democrats on issues like immigration, the economy, whatever, are there, it means that the Democrats are going to have a lot of trouble winning in places that they need to build the coalition underneath it. They're basically in a situation that the Republicans were in from FDR through, I don't know, Clinton even, where they just couldn't win. Like, the Republicans could win elections. Dwight Eisenhower, was president, and Richard Nixon was president, and Reagan was president. But, the Democrats dominated Congress that whole time. And I'm not saying that the Republicans are going to be as dominant as the Dems were in those eras, but it was just like a fact of life. But when you have, like, it's the Democrats are going to have a very hard time building and maintaining congressional majorities as long as they're seen as the party of the other, of like the immigrants and stuff, the immigrants and the criminals and stuff like that. So, but anyway, this all brings up to this upcoming government shutdown. Don't know if it's going to happen or not. You'd assume that the Democrats would have enough self-preservation instincts to not destroy themselves like this. But it's the same idea, because they did this during Trump's first term. The Democrats never shut down the government. And the idea, that's not true. That's not true. There was, I think, one time that they at least did it or threatened it. I'm talking about pre-Trump. But the idea was always, the Democrats never get blamed for a government shutdown. It always gets blamed on the Republicans. Everybody thought that. And so the Democrats during their first term were like, well, we'll shut down the government to get the DREAM Act passed, because the polls showed that the retards in the public wanted the DREAM Act. It'd be like, again, it goes to issue polls. They don't mean anything. And they're like, well, everybody's going to blame Trump. And then even when the shutdown happened, the polls were saying, who do you blame? The Democrats or the Trump? And the polls showed that the public was blaming Trump, not the Democrats. And the Democrats still caved because they knew from their own internal polls that those polls showing the public was blaming Trump were bullshit. Of course they're going to tell the pollsters that they blame Trump. Sorry about that. Of course they're going to tell the pollsters that they blame Trump, but they don't really. And I guess these they just don't learn. They just continue to choose to live in a separate reality. So that the polls are saying it now. The polls say the public is going to blame Trump for a shutdown. Yeah, because the polls always say that. The public always says that. So they're trying to shut it down, not for the immigrants this time. I guess they've learned at least something, but something about like healthcare, which is, the Democrats have two really strong issues that I think. One is healthcare and one is abortion. Dude, I don't know. I've been in this game for a long time. I don't know how we're going to get the Republicans off the abortion stuff. It's just like, we're making progress. But honestly, Trump to Vance is going to be a bit of a step back in that. Because, Vance seems to believe in this pro-life bullshit too. And it's just such a fucking millstone around our neck. And it doesn't need to happen. Because you can say, I can say, just say like me, right? I'm personally pro-life. I think elective abortion is murder. I think the government should take an active role in pursuing policies that will reduce elective abortion. But in that, on that same thing, I have no tolerance for the government pursuing stuff that limiting birth control and stuff, because that's going to lead to more abortions. And then if there are going to be abortions, I would rather have it be the morning after pill than a real abortion. And because I wouldn't say the morning after pill is murder, but I think it's I don't like it. I don't like that either. But it's better than a full-on abortion. So, just say, I don't like abortion. I think it's horrible. Say what Bill Clinton said, safe, legal, rare. Let the Democrats own the Moloch position of abortion is awesome. And, just say we don't want the government involved in it because there is no practical way to get the government involved in it. And if that loses us votes, then we don't deserve to win anyway. It's just if they're going to be if they want to be if the pro-life people want to be purists and be oh, well, unless, we, are, putting women who have abortions in jail, which, by the way, none of them advocate because they know that they don't have the courage of their convictions to advocate for it. They, then, we're just going to sit at home. It's do whatever you want. We're not going to be extorted. There is, even though I'm pro-choice in terms of policy, I would compromise on it. If I needed to be hardcore Republic of Gilead to keep out immigrants, I would do it. And if you're not willing to make stopping immigration a priority, then okay, go do your own thing. But we're not going to light ourselves on fire because of this abortion nonsense. And sorry for the digression. But and then the healthcare stuff. Healthcare, I'm probably more sympathetic with the Republicans on. I could kind of go either way. I don't think that the government, I think it causes more problems for the government to be heavily involved. But I also know that people are really stupid and you just kind of have to meet them where you are. And it's they want all these healthcare subsidies. So I think it's always going to be a strong issue for the Democrats. And, Trump's been an improvement on that front, but, he's still not great. But anyway, the thing is that I think, though, that the public doesn't want to shut down. And I think so the Democrats are going to do it. They're going to shut the government down for this shit. They've got a better case this time. And I think they're going to fail hard and cave because I don't think Trump really cares if they shut it down. I think he's going to say, they shut it down. We offered to keep going. We're still offering it to keep going. I think he's going to just ignore the courts and pay the soldiers and pay whoever he wants anyway. And then just dare them to just go tell the court, okay, you don't like it? Dare the Supreme Court to stop him from paying the troops, and see how, and I think the court would back down on that. So I don't think it'll have much of an impact. I think it's just the Democrats, being retarded, wanting to resist, and they think their position is a lot stronger than it is. So, I would say for the Democrats, I mean, my advice would be to just, you know, sometimes doing nothing is the best move. I would say the Democrats just ride it out and don't ever talk about immigration. Just say that we need to put the American worker first, but we need to be humane in our immigration. Just pretend that you're like, you don't even have to pretend to be anti-immigration. Just don't like make it easy for Republicans to call you open border shills, which you are. And the trans stuff, look, I don't care about it, but it's such an easy win. Just don't talk about it. Just say that, like, do what I think, like Newsom said, like um say well, there shouldn't be any permanent operations on minors, and there shouldn't be, you don't even have to go that far, actually. That's, that would be the moral position, but this is Democrats we're talking about. You don't even have to say that. Just say no biological boys and girls sports. But other than that, just don't put trans people in visible positions in the government. You can maybe put like one token trans person, but don't put them in like the Defense Department or something, so they can't associate you with that. And then really like put in like you're already the party of women and non-whites anyway. So instead, pander to men and whites. Put it like as many white men in visible positions as possible. But other than that, I don't think the Democrats have to change anything. I think they're in okay shape on that front. That's what I think. Anyway, so as for me, yeah, I'm doing better, but I'm not sure why. I get ever since that fast, I guess, because I've been back to eating like shit. I don't know if it was the fast or not. I have been better since that. This weekend, I forgot to take my pill on Saturday, and I was like, what? Like, I didn't feel good, but I was like, what? You know what? I'll just wait till tomorrow. I don't want to. I'll just skip the day's dose, go back tomorrow, instead of having to like worry about, taking it at a different time each day. But as the day went on, I started to feel like a lot more energy. And then so I was like, dude, I don't know. I feel pretty good. And, I wasn't feeling depressed or anything. And so I was like, why don't we try one more day without it? And then the next day, I felt like even more energy than the day before. The next day, I ended up walking, like I actually got 10,000 steps in. And it would have been more, except I couldn't keep walking because, first of all, my legs were actually like cramping up. Like, even though I still had energy, my legs were like going on me. But also because like the rash on my legs, like from when my fat thighs rubbed together, had was bothering me. It had gotten so bad from all that walking the previous day. But no, I felt really good. And but that night, the depression came back, started to come back, and I was like, dude, what? I can't do it. And so I started taking the pills again, and but today I feel pretty well. I've been reading a lot, and today I wasn't trying to stay up, but I went to work, and because normally when I get home from work, I have to take a nap. I'm so tired. Didn't need one tonight, and have enough energy that I may go on a walk. So I seem to be improving gradually, but I don't see any way for me to get off these meds. Because I was thinking about it. I was like, those 2 days, Saturday and Sunday this weekend, I felt better being off the meds than I do on them. And I've been off the meds before, and it's never made me feel better. But I have had things that made me feel a lot better in the short term. I've talked about them all. I've talked ketamine, certain like medication. Keep doing that. Certain medications. One thing that really helped at first and then started to do nothing at all, the kefir. Eating healthy eating. That has like less of a dramatic impact, and it doesn't completely fade like the other ones, but it does. It's not the immediate impact in those first 2 days is usually where it's the biggest, and then it kind of it's still there, but it kind of fades out. The shamanic drumming. Shamanic drumming never really stopped working per se. I just got sick of doing it. Like it wasn't curing it anyway, and it's like half an hour a day, I mean, it's really fucking boring. So, but same idea, you know, like, and even that one, even when it was still working, it didn't work as well as it did those first few days. So I'm assuming that that's what happened with the medication. Like, okay, it's not that stopping the medication actually was curing my fatigue or anything. It's just that like the shock to my system in this particular case improved me, but it would have faded out. I really don't think it's the meds that are causing my fatigue. I mean, they might make it a little worse, but I've been on these meds forever. And like since I was 17. And I didn't have any problem. I mean, I had problems like as long as I slept, I had plenty of energy. You know, I just got old, you know, and I think, and I have had times like weeks at a time where I was completely med free and my fatigue was every bit as bad as it is now. I really don't think it's the meds. I'd like to be off them, but I don't think that's what's doing it. But I don't know, like maybe like sometimes maybe I'll like, you know, skip a day or even skip 2 days because it does seem like I feel better, you know, after taking that 2-day break from them. So no, just like a mystery of why I do seem like why I am feeling better and sleeping better. Again, today to not take a nap, it's not usual for me. And, you know, I'm going to go on a walk later tonight. That's not usual for me either. The only thing I can think of is the reading. You know, I've been reading a lot and, I don't know. I mean, I tried to read, like, you know, figure if I'm going to do all this reading, you know, try to finally, you know, read more of the Bible. But, you know, I just don't find it interesting. And so what I do is right now I'm reading a lot of Stephen King, but I checked out one last Stephen King. I'm going to finish one tonight. And then I checked out one before I made this video. And it's a real long, thick one. And I've read so many Stephen King books. This will probably be the last Stephen King book I ever read. And, but then I'm going to be looking for, you know, for other authors. Yeah, I don't know why it helps because I've looked up like studies, like, is there any studies that it helps with depression or if it's like anything? And the results seem very mixed, but that's the change that I made. That's really helped with a lot of stuff. The sugar cravings are not as bad. But I mean, I don't know. I just don't feel like going back to eating healthy. And I just don't want to do it. And, I do feel better when I'm eating healthy, but I just don't want to do it. And then as for work, you know, at work now, we're not really doing any customer service calls anymore. It's all been, you know, we hired a guy in the Philippines to do some of it. And there's an AI we have that does some of it. So I've been able to focus on outbounds. And, you know, there's some progress there. I haven't sold a ton, but we'll see how it goes. Really, I just, you know, like I said before, I just want to finish the year. I've got some other prospecting ideas. If I do that, you know, we can reconvene in January and see if I want to keep doing this job or look for something else. And sports astrology, I haven't done any. I know you guys would love to see more sports astrology videos. I am working on it. I'd given up for a while because I just felt like I just couldn't beat 50-50. But I've got 2 new things that I'm working on that so far look really promising. One for event charts, one for horary charts. So far, it's been good. I did get got a pretty big win on, because in this past week, I picked the Eagles to beat the Rams and the Chiefs to beat the Giants. So neither of those picks had really good odds. So I put them together in a parlay and bet them. And then the Eagles fell way behind against the Rams. And I had the option then to double down on my bet with much better odds. And the chart was so clear. It's like, yeah, the chart can be wrong. It steered me wrong before. But the chart was so clear. I was like, well, I got nothing to lose. So I put on another $25. And I won. They came back and won. And they ended up actually winning by, you know, an okay margin. in a really bizarre victory. And then the Chiefs, that game was never really in doubt. So yeah, we'll see if I don't know if I have. I'll just tell you right now, I do have the only game that I've looked at for this coming week is the Eagles versus the Bucks. I have the Bucks with the upset. We'll see. That's all for now. Sorry this video sucked. See you in the next.